Hello and welcome to the Above Board podcast from Fathom Analytics. I am, as always, Paul Jarvis, and I am joined, as always, by my co-founder, Jack Ellis.
Hello, good day.
Good morning, sir. It is where I am, it is a bright and sunny. Hold on, let me check. No, it's not sunny anymore. It is a bright Monday morning. It was sunny about 2 hours ago. Now it is not sunny, but it will be by the end of the week.
It's not snowing and it's not raining right now, so we'll take it.
I've heard of snow. Do not like.
Yes, indeed. Right. We got a plan for this episode.
We do.
The name of the episode is In Progress. It's, I wrote down the art of progress.
The name isn't in progress. The name is actually in progress.
So the art of progress. But this is subject to change, of course.
Yes,
but that's the kind of theme. So then, okay, cool. We're going to talk about how we've talked about how we work before, but I want to tie it into more recent things. I want to talk about something that I struggle with and have to fight, and I do fight successfully, but I have to remember to fight it and everything else. And it's something I've had in my head. I think I've talked about how I got there. I don't know how much I've talked about this with like an experience at 14 years old where things blew up, and We'll get to it, I think, as we get there. But talking about analysis paralysis, progress, and different ways that we work, it's not really going to be in the kind of like wake up at 5 a.m., have one espresso and do this. It's not going to be any of that bullshit. It's just going to be talking about things we worked on recently, any problems we've had, and spoiler alert, Paul has less problems than me. But I think I want to
I have
Paul
different
on
problems.
Different problems. Yeah, well, that's perfect then. Yeah, so different problems. And we can get into that. But before we get into that, I mean, we've worked on some big projects. You've worked, I can't even remember who you've worked for. I can think of, you worked for Mercedes, right, in the past? What did you?
Yeah, Mercedes.
What will you talk
Microsoft,
about that you've built? Apps? What did you build for any company?
What did I build for Mercedes? Internal UI, UX for, I don't even remember what it was. But it was more as like a project management something or other. Oh, cool. I've built UI and UX for the biggest media company in Canada, like a way that they could interact with all of their video archives.
Is that Pornhub?
Yeah. Exactly. .ca. .ca though. It was Canadian.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah, but like I guess in the beginning to middle part of my career as a designer, it was mostly application design for huge companies, and then I kind of got off of that and got more into like design and branding for like influencers, I guess, before that was even a thing. But in the beginning, it was mostly like big corporate clients would get me to help organize and make their applications look and work better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So would that be built? That would be refactoring or redesigning something that was there, or would it be designing new applications?
Both. And it would be kind of design plus. Like it wouldn't. I wouldn't just be given wireframes and be told to design the thing. I would be explained what the problem was and what they needed to do, and then figure out, okay, if this is how this thing needs to work, then these are the navigational elements. These are how you interact with the navigation. This is how you get like through a flow from one state to another state. This is how you accomplish tasks, and then designing it into something that looked like the brand. In those scenarios, the brands always existed. I wasn't doing branding for Mercedes or Microsoft, right? Like they already had a brand guide. They already had everything like done for that. It was more just how to translate that into the tasks that they wanted to accomplish in the software that they were building.
Okay, so this makes sense. All right, cool. Yeah, and my background, I've built huge applications. I've done work for law firms. I've built out big websites, removals companies in the UK, media companies in the UK. Most complex work I did was probably the law firm stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
this was working on a huge application, and then before that, doing stuff for myself on the bodybuilding application back in the day. And so I've built complex software, and I think I want to branch into analysis paralysis, and I want to talk about a few things. I'm just sort of looking at the list of things I want to talk about. One of the things that I have often relied on when starting a project is excitement. So when I say excitement, it doesn't mean that things aren't exciting, so I can't move forward. But I rely on the hype, the excitement of a project. So like starting something new or working on a new feature, hype, 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 and that kind of adrenaline or that just euphoria, ecstasy, whatever you want to call it, will often push me into this state of flow where I can just go crazy and I can work for 12 hours a day or something well, with a kid it's a bit harder to do that now, but that would then just put me into this kind of trance-like state, and I would just be able to hammer things out. Where I struggle is when it's working on, like, for example, doing a billing refactor and having to try and figure out all of the different areas that tie into it across the application and how to start that. Because I think, I can make a mistake here, and then this could knock on to this, and you could make a mistake here, and blah, blah, blah. And I am definitely very risk averse when it comes to making mistakes. Like, I really don't want to make mistakes. And the way I seem to counter that is by trying to plan the entire project before I take a single step.
Yeah.
And I've done this before, and I'm going to actually put up another poster or thing in my office that just reminds me, because I can't forget this because it's dangerous. I forgot this for, I don't know, 3 to 4 days, maybe longer. And I'm trying to plan it out. I've still got the paper here. And it feels stupid in hindsight looking back at this, and it's like a billing refactor. On Friday, I clicked and I just realized that I have to do a small thing. And the small thing then compounded and turned into flow. And I just was coding like crazy from that point on without any planning. The root of that, though, was when I was 14 years old, maybe 15. I was somehow working on an application that I had no business being a developer for. I don't know how this happened, but it went super viral. And I want to say had something like 200,000 visitors or something. And it was a PHP application. And I was 14. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about query optimization and a persistent query, or query pooling or whatever else. And the application, we thought we were getting DDoSed, and it was actually just the fact that every time someone loaded a forum post, it would, for every single post on the page, you know how a forum worked. You remember the thread? This is like a message board for people that weren't born in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. You had a post and you'd see the thread, which is the topic, the title, and then like discuss, actually. Oh, they have that, don't they? Is it discuss?
I think discuss is more of a chat.
Fine, okay, but for every post, I would then do a query, multiple queries. Discourse, that's it.
Yes, yeah.
So I do a query for every single post, and I do multiple queries actually for every single post. And I remember how hard that hit me because it was basically broken, and I didn't know why. And I think I then internalized that I had to, in the future, plan stuff in order to not run into the same issue. The only time where off the bat that is suppressed, that kind of automatic nervous system response is suppressed, is when I am beyond excited and I'm in pure ecstasy. And I know we're going to get someone saying, "Oh, just use ecstasy," and you'll be. When I say ecstasy, I don't mean the drug ecstasy. I mean the feeling of ecstasy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, one thing I've never actually asked you, and I guess it is different in design and programming, but you can still, like, what's the biggest fuck up you've had? I mean, how have you interpreted a fuck up? Is your fuck up just, the client doesn't like my design? Like, what is the risk that you take?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved on from application design and was doing like branding and design for, like, I guess influencers before they were called that, I was in charge of everything. So I was in charge of coding the websites and designing the websites. So one time we had a big launch that was like planned for a certain time for this client of mine's website, and we were going to push it live at a certain time. She was going to do this like big promotion for it. I changed the DNS to the wrong IP address. Like it was for a
Oh
server.
yeah,
It was like the test server or something. And at the time, DNS changes didn't propagate very fast.
yeah, I remember.
So I changed it and I left it for a while, and I neither of us looked at it for a bit, and I realized it was wrong, or she realized it was wrong. I don't remember. One of us did, and so I changed it to what it should have been. But it took hours and hours and hours to actually point to the right thing. So there's hours and hours and hours where our website was just like fucking not resolving. And it sucked. Like it sucked. Like it was 100% my fault, and it was because I fucked up, and it was because I
Yeah,
did like the wrong thing. Yeah, so that really sucked. That was probably the biggest one. I mean, I've been
okay, but
fired by
that's
clients. I've been fired by people like, oh, I don't like your design. I'm like, okay, cool.
interesting.
Yeah. But that was the biggest, like, and this was a long term client. I worked with her for probably 10, 15 years. So, like, she didn't fire me, but it still sucked. Like, I felt like shit because I, like,
Okay,
completely
yeah,
messed it up.
but every single developer has a DNS story. This is
Yeah.
like it's like this is my worst thing, and it makes me laugh because that's happened to me. Everyone had beef with DNS. I mean, nowadays we have different options. We understand TTLs, and maybe
Yeah.
back then we didn't understand TTLs as well. And TTLs didn't seem to be acknowledged by a lot of the DNS resolvers. Whereas now
Yep.
it's like Cloudflare and blah 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 blah. Everything's really maybe not for the resolvers, but the resolvers are better,
Yes.
most of them.
100%.
So everyone's got those stories. But that's it. I mean, yeah, I guess you can literally just get fired because they don't like your work or your design. It's like for me, it was. I guess it was similar. You know, yours went offline. Mine was. It was my responsibility to fix, and I had no idea what to do. I guess it's the same thing. But how did you internalize that? Were you just like, oh, I fucked? How old were you when it happened?
Um, I was trying to remember what city or place I was living. This was probably 15 years ago. So I would have been
52.
mid, yeah, would have been 86. I was probably like early to mid 30s.
And how did you internalize that?
Um, I felt like shit, and then
Yeah.
I moved on from it. Like, I mean, I haven't thought about it for years now.
He's never changed a DNS entry since.
Exactly. Oh
Okay,
god,
but
or
I
I just
mean,
switched everything to Cloudflare, and it's just fucking easier, to be
yeah,
honest.
Cloudflare's stupidly easy DNS. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, yeah, I understand TTL now. So if I know something's going to be changed, I'll put the TTL down to as low
Yeah.
as I can go. And
Yeah.
if you've got an old DNS, but even people's understanding of flushing DNS and even setting DNS at network level, I don't remember. I mean, there was not just put your DNS to Cloudflare. I mean, now you could tell everyone to do that,
Yep.
but it depends if it was a launch, maybe not. But so you've never had any analysis paralysis or perfectionism
No, that's not how I operate.
in any areas of your life? What about your plants?
No, nothing. So
Okay.
I my MO, to my success or to my absolute detriment, and it's kind of 50-50, is that I just move forward. I don't care if I'm going to be right, I don't care if I'm going to be wrong, I don't care what the consequences are. I pick something quickly, and then I just move forward with it. And then if I
Default to
fuck up,
action.
which happens quite a bit,
Yep.
then I go back and I change it and I go forward again in a different direction. And that's kind of all, like with the, you were before we started recording, you were like, oh, maybe design is different than development. I don't think it is. I think it's just people are different. Like with design, if I'm starting from a blank slate and I make a decision to move forward in a direction with the design, I'll keep going until it's like, okay, this is shit. Like even with the new version of Fathom, like I think there were 3 versions before, and I'm not talking about 3 versions like we had V1 of Fathom, V2 of Fathom, V3 of Fathom. I had 3 versions of the new version of Fathom before I settled or we settled on the design and look and the way that it works with version 4 of Fathom.
Yeah.
So it like, but that's just how I work. Like I'm just going to go in a direction, even with writing. Like I'm just going to like people. It's funny to hear other authors talking about like, oh, I get stuck with writing, or I don't know where to start, or I start a blank page. Like that's never really been me. I would rather just write shitty, so I'm writing, and then realize that like, okay, this is absolute garbage. I'm going to trash it. I'm going to start again, and that's just like, so that doesn't, and like I said, that it's like a 50-50 that like it actually works or not. It's probably less than 50-50 on my first try for anything, right? Like I don't care if it's going to be good or not the first time, with figuring something out. I just try it and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, I'm like, okay, fuck, walk away, start again, and go from there.
Okay, but so I mean, I'll just this is my perception. That my perception also is what's the cost of being wrong. So I
Yeah,
mean, if I say to you, "Oh, Paul, I'm going to do a database migration," and then I choose the wrong indexes or I choose the wrong shard key, and it's 30, 40, 50, however many billions of rows, the cost of that error is then that I have to I have to then do it again. I
yeah,
mean, you could say, oh, but that's just with that kind of work, you do have that high risk and high cost of error. That is just how it is with regards to like the data because it takes so long to move, right? Because it's so much
yeah.
data. Like, what is your equivalent there? What would be a high cost fuck up? And by high cost, I don't mean financially, but I mean just it's going to take a whole bunch of work to fix.
Yeah, I mean, every redesign is
Mm,
so the interesting thing with with redesigns is that everybody hates them at first.
yeah.
Regardless of how good they are, regardless of how much it makes it better, regardless of anything, everybody hates a redesign. Like I'm talking from a customer's perspective, everybody hates a redesign right in the beginning, right? And then as the designer, as a person in charge of it, you have to then parse out like, is this just how it works? Because it's always how it works. Like, is there something that was wrong or something that was misinterpreted? Because I don't design for the sake of like I'm not an artist, I'm a
Mhm.
designer, and the difference there is that the decisions that I make are based on business or brand, and not just I think this. Like if you ever ask me about like why is the button here or why is it this color, like I always have an answer because I literally do everything based on some fact that I have, that I've learned from customers or from surveys or from something else where I'm making a decision based on what needs to happen or what the next step is or how to get from point A to point B as easily as possible. And that can be wrong sometimes. Like I'm wrong often. And sometimes like we can make things worse with a redesign or with a refactor or with like making a feature, changing a feature. We can sometimes be wrong. And like we have to think like, okay, has like a few people complained about it and that's kind of par for the course. Like that's just
At
how it
scale, that's
works.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah, or is it like we had a couple people when we launched the new look and feel, the like kind of slightly different look and feel for I guess what we're calling 3.5, where people hit with version 3 we had a couple people saying like if you don't change it back I'm quitting using your software,
Right.
right? But it was like 4 people maybe out of thousands, and it's like okay,
Yes.
this is just how it works. None of them actually did quit. I looked.
Yep. Fair
um,
enough.
yeah, but like so it's things like that, and I mean I'm always looking to figure out what's the least risky way to do something. Like when you were talking about like data migration, well, how can you do like a test run of that? Or how can you do it with like not live data or like a smaller data set or sample set or something like that? Like for me, I'm always trying to look at like what's the least risky way to do it. Cause I know me and I know I just want to like start moving. Like I need movement or else I get
Yes.
really stressed out.
Okay.
Um, so it's what can be done that's the least risky thing. And for me, with like a redesign, it's like okay, I can do this internally. I can show you. I can show the other two people. We can show like the 10 customers who we kind of bounce ideas off of. Like we can kind of move incrementally that way. With writing, it's the same thing. Like I could show my agent. I could show my editor. I could have like 10 people that I know read the book and give me some honest feedback kind of thing. So when I launch it, it's de-risked as much as it possibly can be, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
So that's interesting actually, because when you were, the design versus developer, I know developers and they're going to be thinking, oh no, but with design, it's just the look and everything. What you just said though, you launch it, it's very hard, especially when it includes new features. It's very hard to then casually roll that back. You could easily get analysis paralysis about a design change. That's a
Yeah.
huge thing. I mean, looking at V4 and how V4 compares to the current version 3.5, the changes are substantial. You could have easily got analysis paralysis over the complete redesign. And I'd never really thought of that. The redesign is it's an equivalence. It for sure is, because there's a lot
Mm.
of risk and people could everyone could hate it. I mean, they
Yep.
weren't. The V4 was fucking awesome. I mean, I'll say
There
that.
will be at least a dozen, probably 2 dozen people asking if we can roll their account back to the previous version. Like I'm
Yeah.
100% certain that is going to happen because it always happens. And
No, that's
we're not going to allow that. Like that's
no
just
for
not
sure.
how, yeah, that's not, I,
No, V4 is awesome.
yeah.
There's a few things. Yeah, V4 is awesome. Okay, so you get stressed if you're not in motion.
Yep.
That
100%. So I don't think
yeah,
one way, I don't think your way or my way, one is better, one is worse. I just think they're different and they have different pros and they have different cons.
I was talking to my friend Ed, and he says that going into this over analyzing state is a freeze state, like your body responding, fight, flight, freeze, and all of that stuff is a freeze state. Whereas you go into the fight. Motion is fight, right?
Yeah.
That is the right way to respond to hard work and be in motion. Clearly, there's an element of planning, but I think the active way of doing planning is to set a timer saying, I'm going to plan for 30 minutes. Once the timer goes off, no matter where I am, I'm going to start moving. Like, you need to cap your planning. And I think that I want to move into the big projects, and when you're working on big projects and how you plan them. So let's talk about, version 4. You have designed the entire thing from the ground up. You built your own CSS framework, which people aren't going to believe, which is fucking awesome. It works great.
But
How?
why didn't you use Tailwind?
Yeah. See, and I like, you like Adam. I like Adam. I like Tailwind. You like Tailwind, but you like
Tailwind
writing CSS.
Yeah, Tailwind's amazing.
But people are still going to ask you, and you're going to. Oh no! Luckily, you're not on Twitter, so they'll ask me. Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. Jack and team.
That's, dude, there's the guy on Twitter that one time that you had tweeted when you were on Twitter. You had tweeted about something launching, and the guy writes, "Congrats," because I retweeted it, and he writes, "Congrats, Jack and team." And this was years ago, and that was on your tweet. Keep in mind that was years ago, and this guy still does the joke whenever, like, if I tweet something, "Congrats, Jack and team," and this is
It's a good joke.
3 years later or something.
Dude,
So
I think our Twitter still says Jack and team.
yeah,
Pretty sure it does. I gotta lie, I don't go to Twitter very often, but yeah, it still says run by Jack Allison team, which I
Amazing.
wrote, which is what I want.
Amazing. All right, let's talk about V4 and how you built this then. So you have had to redesign everything. I mean, the current version of Fathom has not got space for all the new features we're building. Like Teams functionality that is not built into the interface. You're starting off on V4. You're going back in time now, because I mean, like, let's actually go to the most recent version of it, because we know we did a few versions to get it right.
Yes.
How are you starting off this project?
Of version 4.
Yeah, this is true. But to get to where we are now, I'm really happy with the design, and you did a great job. But how did you start off with this? Did you sit down and plan all the pages you've got to do, or describe the process, or even describe how you would do, like version 5? Describe what you would do starting a project, or what you did.
Yeah, so I mean, I would start with brand. Is the brand immovable or is it malleable? And for us, because I'm in charge, it's malleable. So I don't have to, we don't have to answer to anybody, and I can adjust the branding slightly. Like, I'm not going to make the whole thing like pink and orange, because that doesn't make sense. But like, I've changed our purple twice. I've changed our cats. I've changed our cats, I think 4 times, because initially they were like stock art that I purchased. Then I hired the company that made the stock art to make better ones and different ones. And then I just started drawing the cats myself. So the first thing that I have to do is figure out the brand. So color palette, which is fucking tough. Like, you should see my house, because I'm in the middle of painting my house right now too. Like, the number of grays I've tried on my fucking grays and beiges or grayish that I've tried on my walls is fucking ridiculous. Like, the amount
Color
of
palette comes first for the brand. Okay.
Yeah, color palette, because that's the vibe. Like, that's the tone, right?
Okay.
I don't think I'm redesigning our logo anytime soon. I think it's in a place where it is perfect. Then I move on to typography. So I don't know if you've looked at this, but on all of the design or the UI repos that I've published to our internal GitHub, there's always an index file that just looks like a fucking dog's dinner of like headings and paragraphs and weird form elements in different places and accordions and drop down menus. I don't know if you've ever seen these like underscore index pages that I make.
Right.
but that's basically like I want to see how all of the elements stand on their own and work and look. And so I do that after I've got like the branding and the colors and the typography done. I move on to elements, and then I move on to like smaller interface things, like some people call them cards, of like groups of things, like what a modal window looks like, what a like pop over looks like, what a drop down list looks like. And then I kind of go, like I kind of start from the most minuscule or minute point or detail about it to the most macro and biggest thing. So the last thing I design is what a page looks like. And then when I have what a page could look like with text or a form or something like that, then I move on to, okay, how does this need to work? And then I stop doing design for like a month, because it's figuring out like, where does this menu go? What goes in this menu? What's the order of the menu? What does this menu look like in dark mode? What does this look like on a mobile device?
Mm.
Right. So like organizing, especially for version 4, because we kind of have three main sections of the application. We have, and each of them has a ton of states. So the dashboard, ton of different versions of the dashboard, from like shared or public dashboards to private dashboards to dashboards that have filters applied to dashboards that have like comparison. Like there's so many versions of a dashboard. Then we have the settings section. Then we have, which will be new for version 4, which people haven't seen yet, is the account section. And we've kind of separated account functions and setting functions for very specific reasons. Um, so then I kind of get into that of like, what do each of these sections kind of look like and how do they work? And then I get into the design of the pages and how those pages look and work. And sometimes too, like I go back and forth to the very beginning. Like sometimes I'll get into like 2 months into what it looks like, and I'm like, fuck, the gray background doesn't look like the right gray.
Right.
Like the hue isn't right. So I go back and I redo all of the hues of grays for it. I think I've probably done that 3 times with this. Or the purple just isn't standing out as much as I think it does. Or the way that I designed tables doesn't work. Or paragraph text is just slightly too big, or that sort of thing. So I kind of go back and forth, but at least I have a framework for movement of like, I've designed all of the headings, the paragraphs, the form elements, all of that. I can start putting it together. And if it doesn't work, then I go back to the beginning and are like, okay, this is like, it doesn't look right in the application interface, so I'm going to change it a little bit, or like adjust the padding or that kind of thing. That's kind of the process, where it's not quick because I do go back to scratch several times,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like there's always movement, so I'm always okay with it. Like I'm always either designing or planning or writing for it. So I might have to do the same work 4 times, but I'm still moving. It's just like the analogy is like, I would rather drive further. I'd rather drive more kilometers or miles and not be sitting in traffic than sitting in
that's
traffic.
that's the airport thing, isn't it?
Well, even like, I don't want to
Waiting
be
for-
on the highway in bumper to bumper traffic. I'd rather take side roads knowing that they're going to take longer because they're less busy. And like, I'm still going to get there at the same amount of time, or it might even take me longer, but I feel better because I feel like I've been moving the whole time. And that's
Defaulting to
analogous
motion.
to design for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So I guess the one thing you didn't really talk about is there was no planning. How many times did you pull out the pencil and paper and plan out what pages you have to build and how they tie in and what elements they need or whatever it
No,
may
there
be?
was, sorry. After I figured out what pages should look like, then I figured out, okay, what pages do we need? What flows do we need? And I planned
How
all
long
of
did you
that out. And
spend on that?
that's when I stopped for a month or two from design to work on the planning, and then went back into
Okay,
design.
well, okay,
Yeah.
so interesting. So you did okay, but you do have a planning stage then.
Yeah.
How do you separate the planning from analysis paralysis?
I just start planning it. Like I have probably 150 versions of what our menu should look like for settings and accounts.
No, but then how?
And the
Okay, but you
planning
said
is me designing those pages, even though kind of
okay.
like
Well,
in
that's different.
writing.
No, that's
Yeah,
different.
kind of like in writing.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. A month on planning. I can't
Yeah.
picture this. But how do you? Okay, but then how is that not analysis paralysis if you do it for a month? A month of planning. Like, how do you separate
Because
that?
I'm not stuck at any point. I'm just like, I'll come
Okay.
up with what the navigation and the layout should be, and then I'll see like, does this work or not? And that's probably 5 seconds of thinking. Like,
Okay.
honestly, it should be longer because I would probably be able to be more efficient. But like, I'm always like in the planning, I'm kind of doing the layout in my head because I've already designed what the elements look like. So I kind of know what it's going to look like. So the planning is really just me like writing out how things work, and then if I can see in my mind, does this work or not? And if it does, like if the menu has like 18 elements, I'm like, okay, this menu is too fucking long,
Okay.
or like this should go in account, or like I'll text it to you and you'll be like, that needs to go in account settings for this reason. I'm like, okay, well then I got to adjust it. So there's always a lot of adjusting, but there's always that movement that we've talked about.
No, for sure. I think that's the planning in design. I mean, you're talking about how you're going to lay out certain things and whatever else. I mean, that feels like it's part of the design. You're not
Yeah.
like planning. It can be a tricky one. I think I do. If I start getting out a pencil and paper, I'm now taking that to be a red flag. I mean, or if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it quickly
Yeah.
because I do. There's no point in me trying to map out. People will disagree with me here, but for me, there's no point in me trying to map out the entity relationships because I will find that typically when I'm in flow, they will come to me very quickly. I think I need the objectives for the most part, and then I can just go from there and just flow. And it is, yeah. I mean, I prefer to be in motion too.
Yeah.
So, my recent thing that I wrote about was I was getting stuck on billing, or I felt like I was spending too long because you were me and it was me and you figuring it out. Billing and all the changes were a complete headache, but I was just annoyed because I thought, you know what, I should just be coding. I should just be coding some stuff and seeing what happens. And then on the Friday, I was like, you know what, no, I'm just going to start coding, and I'm going to try and do something small, and it all just flowed out.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of the quote that I like is little by little, which is like from the Oasis song. It's not the same theme, but just the quote little by little. Every time I try and like say, for example, I said, I forget the specifics now. It's something like, I'm going to check the subscriptions table to see if we've got any like multiple subscriptions for a user, and then look at that, and then look at how cash is doing this. And I basically get little tasks, and then suddenly it would accidentally flow into more little tasks that then became big when combined.
Mm-hmm.
And that then gives me the flow, and that gives me the momentum. When I have momentum, I can move like crazy. The way I get momentum is often, like, say, for example, when we launched the compare feature, we had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
query issues. In the space of like 4 hours, I literally rewrote like a bunch of the compare queries, and that gives me that adrenaline or momentum. I can work like crazy. But the way I seem to get momentum on the bigger projects is by starting off smaller,
Yeah.
and it comes back to your motion thing. I have to aim lower. And I think my advice to people that are struggling or get stuck is you need to aim lower. And if you can't do the thing that you just aimed for, aim even lower. Like,
What's my
literally.
favorite quote?
My favorite quote. What is your favorite quote?
My favorite thing to say when you get stuck in that.
Oh, Christ. Your favorite quote to say, what? I can't remember. This is me, dude. I forget everything. Like, I
Oh,
have to write it down, otherwise I
you
forget.
can't sit down and write a book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, you say that all the time. This is true.
Yeah, exactly. I say
Yes.
that all the time.
But it's tricky though, because if I'm internalizing that, I'm like, oh, but I still need to plan what I'm going to do. Yeah, there's an element of planning, but no one needs to spend hours doing. I really
Yeah,
don't
plan
think.
the small thing and then move forward.
Yeah, but defaulting to motion seems to be the thing. And billing is not exciting. Billing is one of those things that has to be done and refactored for what we want to do. But it doesn't excite me. When I'm working on like server side ingest or the new proxy that we're building or the new ingest, the million requests per second, I'm going to be hyped. I mean, I have been hyped working on that, and that just flows. But when I have to do the more boring stuff, and especially when it's more boring and complex, I think I have to aim for something small to then get the dopamine loop going, or
Yeah.
I believe it's dopamine, and it helps. But then default to motion, that has to be the answer. And that is, I talked about this again, like I joked that you've been doing this before the book came out, but it was still relevant for a lot of us, and it was called The War of Art.
Hmm.
You've read that book. I assume you've read that book. It was
Yeah.
about just doing the work, but it isn't specifically get into motion. Like I do. I think the planning, that is it. The analysis paralysis. If you struggle with analysis paralysis, set a time limit on the planning and then get coding. Even if you're going to do it wrong. It's not going to be perfect the first time or the second time, maybe the third time. Even then it won't be perfect because you have to come back and do it. I always get a kick when someone's like, yeah, I finalized my database schema. I'm like, no, you haven't. Not if you grow. If you grow,
For
you have
now,
not
you
finalized
did.
that schema. Because
Yeah.
literally your business needs change and your queries change and there is no perfection.
Yeah. For that specific point in time, it's 100% finalized for this specific moment in time.
Yep,
Next moment, who
exactly.
knows? Yeah. But that's, I mean, that's what Stephen, that's what Pressfield writes about, right? Is like, and that's what a lot of writers talk about. And it kind of applies to everything. It's like that the first draft is going to be shitty. Like the first draft of my last book was a fucking train wreck. Like it was absolute garbage. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is going to be a book. And then it doesn't matter because I'll just go back. Like I actually, I think what I realized about myself too as I've gotten older is that like I don't mind revising my own work. Like I
Right.
don't mind. Like it's kind of fun to do something, learn how. Like this is actually how I code because I'm not that good of a coder. Right? Is like I code something and then I go and look at that code and see like, okay, how can I make this better? Like version 3 of the CSS file was 50% larger than the current version because the fourth version of it was I was looking at version 3 and thinking, okay, how can I optimize this? So for when I wrote the first one, it was I didn't care how to optimize it. I wanted to figure out how to do it. And then once I knew how to do it, I could then go and optimize it. But I can't be planning how to optimize something that I haven't done yet. Like I'm not smart enough to be able to do both of those things at the same time. Like
Right.
I can't write and edit at the same time. I can write and I can then edit, but I can't do both because then I feel like that would fuck me up and it would take too long.
Embracing imperfection in addition to the motion. One of my
Yeah.
big beliefs is that you have to be in motion to get lucky. The way I think
Mm.
about luck, obviously there's random luck. Like, you walk outside and there's $1 million on the floor. Actually, that's not luck. You have to talk to the police. But anyway, there's random luck, complete random luck. And then there's the luck that happens when you're in the right place because you're in motion, right? Like Aaron Francis talks about publishing your work and that just increasing your luck. And I do absolutely believe that because you're in motion. And it comes back to what we just said. You're in motion. And by being in motion, you improve the luck, or I guess the chances, you can call it whatever you want, of actually getting it right. Whereas I think my brain, in a protective fashion, does go to, I've got to get this right first time. So I'm going to plan it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my biggest thing is remembering not to do that. And when I remember not to do that, I can code thousands of lines a day and I can
Yeah.
just whack through it. But as soon as I get the pen and paper, I just have to change it. The reason I'm talking about this, by the way, is because I know a lot of people struggle with this. A lot
Yeah.
of developers don't know what to do. Even they ship their products and they don't know how to market it. And I'm just do one little thing, do something,
Yeah.
get feedback, move forward. You can't get any feedback. You just talked about you don't know how you're going to revise it. You need to get feedback. You need to
Yeah.
actually do the work.
And the feedback can sometimes just be internal, right? Like I don't typically show anybody my first draft of anything because I can critique that and I want to critique that and I want to learn from that myself. And then
Yeah.
like version 3 or 4, like I'll show you or I'll show the other people that work for us or I'll show my editor, publicist or whatever. And like that, but like I think even that like it kind of reminds me, and maybe because I was watching the Tom Brady roast last night, and the beginning of it started with the Teddy Roosevelt quote, "The man in the arena," who everybody knows. But I always thought about that quote as as a quote about internal critics and less about external critics. Like it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out the strong man who stumbles or the doer of deeds who could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man in the arena. I always thought about that as more of like an internal thing, even though I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure that's not what Roosevelt meant. But I think when we're critical of ourselves in the beginning of stuff, then we don't move forward, right? And most of the time, the biggest critic is internal, anyways, right? Like it sounds
Yeah.
like with you, like that you're more critical of your potential future work than anybody else would be, and I'm kind of the same
Mm.
as well, right? Where it feels like you have to get over the internal critic first because the other critics come when you publish the shit, and then
For
you
sure.
should have enough confidence by then to be able to figure out like is this criticism valid or not. But in the beginning, it's the internal critic that I think is the hardest to get over,
And the response
because
has
that's
to
what
be
stops
action.
progress. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
stops the progress. Yeah,
I will say something as well. When we built V2, I remember being in the UK and
yeah,
I was just like burned out because we were working hard to get that live. I forget the specifics, but it was hard. And I remember just saying to myself, little by little, one
yeah,
step at a time. And I that was in my head. And then I couldn't forget that because it was in my head. And I just, every time I got something done, I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Little by little, it worked.
yeah,
And because it would work and I'd actually get the feedback, it then became just mantra. And I think some things happen which, like database migrations, really, you have to plan those, but there's obviously a
yeah.
limit. I always like that Tim Ferriss thing where he's like, write out what can go wrong and then what you're going
Hmm.
to do if that does go wrong. And that helps so much for database migrations. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I've learned how to do them where I can be reduce risk, basically.
Hmm.
But yeah, all right then. So the takeaway from you and from, I mean, yeah, is default to action. If you need to plan for 30 minutes, an hour if you want to push it. That's it. And then start
Yeah.
coding or start building.
Yeah. If anything's bigger than that, then you've bit off too much at once. You're trying to
Right.
plan too big of a thing. All right. Like even with book planning, like I'm not going to sit down and plan the whole fucking book because like it doesn't, like that would take days. And by the time I got to the end of the plan, I would have forgotten the beginning of the plan. Like I have a shitty memory too. So I think that also
Yes.
helps where I can only hold a certain amount of information in my head.
Same.
So I can only plan a little bit at a time.
Okay, I'm the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've forgotten what's in
I
the
think
fucking
everybody
plan from the
is.
beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, it's true. And you've got nothing done. So it's not like you can even just lean on that. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
go back to the plan and this other piece of paper. No, that's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. This
All
was
right.
a fun episode discussing this stuff, and I hope it was helpful for some other people struggling. I feel very good. Like I've been stressed and like, oh, because such a big project, I don't even care anymore. I'm just gonna do something small, and it will just turn
Nice.
into thousands of lines of code, and it'll be dandy. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy.
All right. Let's get off of this podcast and get to work, my friend. And yeah, everybody, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Cheers.
See you in 2 weeks.